Let me ask you something that might be a little uncomfortable. When was the last time you felt genuinely, deeply satisfied after buying something? Not the rush of clicking Add to Cart, not the anticipation while the package tracked across the country, not even the first 5 minutes after you ripped open the box. I mean the lasting, settled satisfaction that said, yes, this was worth it. This was the right call. For most people, that memory is either very distant or doesn't exist at all. And the reason why is going to change how you think about money for the rest of your life. Because here's what nobody in personal finance ever tells you. The problem isn't that you don't know how to save. The problem isn't that you make too little, or that the economy is rigged, or that your expenses are unavoidable. The real problem, the one hiding underneath all of those surface-level explanations, is that your brain has been engineered to keep you spending, and the financial system you live inside has been architected at extraordinary expense to exploit exactly that. Today we're going to go somewhere most money videos never go. We're not doing budgeting tips. We're not talking about lattes. We're going to go into the neuroscience, the behavioral economics, and the psychological architecture of why intelligent, capable, hardworking people stay financially stuck. And then, because understanding a trap is the first step to escaping it, we're going to walk through what actually breaks the cycle. Not discipline, not willpower, not a new app. The actual structural rewiring that creates lasting financial change. Stay with me through this whole thing, because the insight that matters most isn't coming in the first 10 minutes. The pieces build on each other. By the end, you're going to see your own financial behavior differently than you ever have before. And that shift, that moment of clarity, is worth more than any budgeting spreadsheet ever written. Let's start with your brain, because that's where all financial decisions actually happen, regardless of what you tell yourself about being rational. When you see something you want, a new gadget, a piece of clothing, a car upgrade, anything, your brain releases dopamine. Not when you get the thing, when you anticipate getting it. The neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz spent decades mapping this, and what he discovered is counterintuitive and a little devastating. The dopamine spike happens at the moment of anticipation. The moment of acquisition is almost always a letdown. By comparison, this is why unboxing videos get more views than product reviews. It's why the best part of planning a vacation is often the planning itself. And it's exactly why buying things feels so compelling and yet so hollow afterward. Here's why this matters financially. Every time you browse a store, scroll through a product page, or open a shopping app, you are triggering a dopamine response. Your brain is getting a reward before you've spent a single dollar. The system has evolved and been deliberately designed to maximize this anticipatory loop. Limited time offers, low inventory warnings, one-click checkout. These aren't just convenience features, they are dopamine optimization tools. They compress the gap between desire and purchase so that your rational prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that thinks about consequences and future outcomes, never has a chance to weigh in. The financial services industry figured this out decades ago. Credit cards exist in their modern form, specifically because research showed that removing physical cash from the transaction reduced the psychological pain of paying. When you tap a card or click a button, the transaction doesn't feel like a real loss the way handing over paper money does. Buy now, pay later. Services like Afterpay and Klarna have taken this even further, literally removing the experience of financial consequence from the moment of purchase. You buy, you feel good. The invoice arrives later, when the dopamine has long since faded and you're left wondering why you have $43 left in your checking account. Now here's the piece that really breaks people when they hear it. This is not a willpower. Read that again. This is not a willpower problem. Research on ego depletion. The idea that self-control is a finite resource that depletes as you use it throughout the day consistently shows that by evening most people have burned through the majority of their decision-making capacity. Studies of judges showed that parole decisions became significantly harsher as the day went on. Studies of doctors showed diagnostic quality declined in afternoon hours. Every decision you make, including the decision to resist an impulse purchase, draws on the same pool of cognitive resources. So when you find yourself tired and stressed at 10 o'clock at night, scrolling through your phone and suddenly buying 3 things you didn't plan to buy, that's not a character flaw. That's your depleted prefrontal cortex losing control to your dopamine-hungry limbic system. You were set up. The question isn't how to try harder. The question is how to redesign the environment so the battle doesn't happen at 10 o'clock at night when you've already lost. This is the first fundamental shift in how to think about financial behavior. Stop treating it as a moral issue and start treating it as an engineering problem. Your brain has predictable vulnerabilities. A good financial life isn't built by being stronger than those vulnerabilities. It's built by designing systems that work around them. Now let's talk about the mechanism that turns good earners into people with nothing to show for it. Because understanding dopamine and spending is just the foundation. What builds on top of it? What turns individual bad purchases into a systemic's financial trap is something economists call lifestyle inflation, and what I want to call by its more accurate name, the invisible ratchet. A ratchet is a mechanical device that moves in one direction only. It clicks forward and then locks, preventing backward movement. Lifestyle is exactly like this. When your income rises, your lifestyle expands to meet it. That's natural. That's understandable. But unlike a salary, which can be cut at any time, a lifestyle almost never voluntarily contracts. The new apartment feels necessary. The nicer car feels necessary. The upgraded gym membership, the better neighborhood, the restaurant tier that's now normal, all of it clicks into place and locks. The ratchet effect explains a phenomenon that surprises people when they first encounter the data. In study after study on financial well-being, income is a weak predictor of financial security. The correlation between how much you earn and how much you save is remarkably low. What predicts financial security much more reliably is the gap between income and spending. And that gap is almost entirely determined by how aggressively the ratchet has clicked. Here's a concrete way to understand what this costs. Imagine 2 people. One earns $60,000 and lives on $45,000. The other earns $95,000 and lives on $92,000. The first person has $15,000 a year to save and invest. The second has $3,000. Over 10 years, at a 7% average return, the first person has built roughly $200,000 in wealth. The second has built $40,000, and this assumes neither loses their job, gets sick, or faces any financial disruption, conditions that favor the person with savings heavily. The ratchet effect is particularly dangerous because it disguises itself as reasonable progress. Of course, you got a nicer car when you got promoted. Of course, you moved to a better apartment when you got the raise. Of course, you upgraded the vacation when you started earning more. None of these decisions feels irresponsible in the moment. They feel like appropriate rewards. They feel like the natural shape of a life going in the right direction. And that's precisely why the ratchet is so effective. It doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like success. The psychological concept that drives this is called hedonic adaptations, and it's one of the most well-documented phenomena in all of behavioral science. Hedonic adaptation means that humans return to a roughly stable baseline level of happiness relatively quickly after positive events. The research on lottery winners, often cited, shows that within 18 months to 2 years, most winners return to approximately their pre-win happiness levels. The same adaptation happens with every lifestyle upgrade. The new apartment feels amazing for the first few weeks. Then it becomes normal. Then it becomes the floor, the minimum acceptable standard. Then you need the next upgrade to get that feeling back. This is the core loop of lifestyle inflation. Upgrade, feel good, adapt, feel neutral. Upgrade again, feel good, adapt, feel neutral. Repeat for 40 years and wonder where all the money went. What breaks this loop is not willpower, again. It's not telling yourself to be satisfied with less. That approach fails almost universally because it's fighting against a neurological process that evolved over millions of years. What actually breaks the loop is structural intervention. It's automating the savings before hedonic adaptation can ratchet the lifestyle. It's defining specific limits before income rises so that when the raise comes, the new income goes somewhere intentional before the lifestyle can claim it. The people who manage to escape the ratchet aren't people with more discipline. They're people who made decisions in advance, at moments when their environment was calm and their prefrontal cortex was online, and then made those decisions automatic so that they couldn't be undone at 10 o'clock at night when dopamine is running the show. There is also a social dimension to lifestyle inflation that deserves direct attention, because it's one of the most powerful and least discussed forces in personal finance. Status is a fundamental human drive. Across every culture and recorded history, humans have sought status and used visible possessions as signals of it. This isn't shallow or materialistic. It's biological. Status conferred real advantages in ancestral environments. The problem is that in a modern consumer economy, this ancient drive has been weaponized. Advertising exists at its core to link products to status, to make you feel that the right car, the right watch, the right neighborhood, the right kitchen signals something important about who you are and where you belong. Robert Cialdini's research on social proof shows that people look to others to determine appropriate behavior. If everyone around you upgrades their phone every 2 years, not upgrading starts to feel abnormal. If your peer group renovates kitchens, lives in certain neighborhoods, takes certain vacations, the baseline shifts. The lifestyle minimum in your social circle becomes your psychological minimum, often without any conscious awareness. This is why financial behavior tends to cluster socially. People with high-saving friends tend to save more. People whose social circles spend freely tend to spend freely. It's not because you're consciously copying them, it's because social norms operate below conscious awareness, quietly setting what feels like the appropriate level of consumption. All right, we've established that your brain has been engineered to spend, that lifestyle expands to fill available income, and that social forces amplify both dynamics. Now let's talk about a thinking tool that, once you absorb it, changes the way every financial decision looks. Most people calculate the cost of ownership as the purchase price. That's the number on the receipt. That's what gets compared to the balance in the checking account. But the purchase price is just the entry fee. The real cost of ownership extends across the entire duration of possession, and for most things, the ongoing costs dwarf the initial purchase. Let me walk you through this concretely, because the abstract version doesn't land the same way as the numbers do. Take a car, not a luxury car, a normal, reasonable, upper-middle-class car. Let's say $40,000. Most people evaluate this purchase by whether they can afford the monthly payment, which at current interest rates on a 5-year loan is somewhere around $750 to $800 a month. They look at their income, look at that number, decide it's manageable, and sign. But that monthly payment is just the first layer of the true cost. Insurance on a $40,000 car, depending on your location and record, runs somewhere between $150 and $300 a month. Registration fees, which vary by state, add another $30 to $60 a month when annualized. Maintenance, oil changes, tires, brakes, unexpected repairs averages about $100 a month on a newer vehicle and climbs as the car ages. Fuel, which fluctuates but averages nationally around $150 to $200 a month for typical commuting. And then there is depreciation, which is the cost nobody counts because it doesn't show up as a bill. A new car loses roughly 15 to 20% of its value in the first year alone. That $40,000 car is worth $32,000 to $34,000 before you've made a single payment. Add all of this up, and the true monthly cost of that $40,000 car, including depreciation, is somewhere between $1,200 and $1,500 a month. On a $50,000 income, that's between 29 and 36% of gross income consumed by a single asset. Financial planners generally recommend keeping total transportation costs below 15% of income. The math doesn't work, but the monthly payment looks manageable, so the purchase happens. This pattern repeats across every major category of possession. The boat that costs $30,000 to buy costs $3,000 or more per year in insurance, winterization, storage, maintenance, and registration every year, regardless of how often it's used. The vacation property that seems like an investment carries property taxes, insurance, maintenance, HOA fees, and opportunity cost on the capital. The home gym that costs $8,000 to build occupies space in your home that, in most urban areas, represents $800 to $1,200 per year in implicit rent when you calculate cost per square foot. The concept I want you to build into your thinking is opportunity cost, because it's the one that most radically changes financial decision-making when people actually internalize it. Every dollar you spend on a depreciating asset is a dollar that didn't get invested, and investment dollars don't sit still. At a 7% average annual return, the rough historical average of a diversified stock market portfolio, money doubles approximately every 10 years. That means a dollar spent today has an opportunity cost not just of $1, but of $2 10 years from now, $4 20 years from now, $8 30 years from now. When you look at large purchases through this lens, the math becomes striking. A $20,000 car upgrade over a car that functionally serves your needs represents $40,000 in foregone wealth a decade from now. The kitchen renovation that costs $40,000 represents $80,000 in foregone wealth in 10 years and $160,000 in 20. This isn't to say these expenditures are never worthwhile. It's to say that they carry costs that are invisible in the moment of purchase and enormous over a lifetime. Here's an exercise worth doing. Pick your largest discretionary purchase of the past 3 years. Calculate what that money would be worth in 30 years at 7% annual return. Then ask yourself whether you're getting 30-year value out of whatever you bought. For most people, working through this exercise creates a lasting shift in how they experience the decision to spend. Not guilt, not deprivation, just accurate accounting of what things actually cost. The other dimension of true cost accounting is what I call the maintenance tax, the ongoing time, energy, and attention that possessions extract. Every object you own must be cleaned, organized, insured, maintained, and eventually disposed of. This isn't just a financial cost, it's a life cost. Research on decision fatigue suggests that the sheer number of decisions required to manage a complex life, what to clean, what to fix, what to ensure, what to organize, contributes meaningfully to cognitive load and stress. Researchers at UCLA's Center on Everyday Lives of Families found that studying the homes of middle-class American families, the more possessions people owned, the higher their cortisol levels, a primary stress hormone, tended to run. Your stuff is literally making you more stressed in ways you're not consciously aware of. This is the hidden cost that minimalism actually addresses, not deprivation of nice things, elimination of the maintenance tax. People who own significantly less report not just financial benefits, but measurable psychological benefits: lower stress, better focus, more time, less decision fatigue. The financial and psychological returns compound each other. Now we go deeper into territory that most financial content never touches because it requires looking at something uncomfortable. The reason many people struggle to change their financial behavior isn't ignorance of the math. They can do the math. The reason is identity. Who they are, in their own mind and in the eyes of others, is entangled with what they own and how they spend. This isn't unique to any income level or demographic. It operates across the full spectrum. The working-class person who upgrades their truck because their identity is tied to projecting success in their community. The upper-middle-class professional who owns a certain kind of home because their sense of having made it requires the external validation of a specific address. The young urban professional whose social identity is built around restaurants, travel, and experiences that signal belonging to a particular cultural tier. In each case, the spending isn't really about the thing being purchased. It's about the story the person is telling, to themselves and to others, about who they are. This is why purely rational financial advice so often fails to produce behavior change. Telling someone to buy a cheaper car doesn't just mean they drive a different vehicle. In their own mind, it means they're a different person, a lesser person, someone who didn't make it, or doesn't value quality or settled. The rational case for the cheaper car runs directly into a psychological wall of identity protection. The psychologist Carol Dweck's work on mindset is useful here. Dweck distinguishes between a fixed mindset, where your traits and status are fixed quantities that must be protected and performed, and a growth mindset, where your traits and status are malleable and developing. People with fixed mindsets around status and success are the most vulnerable to identity-based spending, because possessions become markers of a fixed self that must be maintained and defended. People who adopt a growth orientation around wealth, seeing it as something they're building rather than something they're performing, are less dependent on visible possessions as status signals and more capable of making financially rational decisions. Here's a practical observation that follows from this. Sustainable financial change almost always involves an identity shift before a behavior shift. It's not that you decide to budget and then become someone different. It's that you decide to become someone different, someone who is building real financial power rather than performing financial success. And then the budgeting becomes a natural expression of that identity. The question to ask yourself is this: what is your current spending actually about? Not what you tell yourself it's about. Not, "I need nice things," or "I work hard and deserve it." Those are rationalizations, not reasons. What does it actually signal to you and to others? And why does that signal feel important? Following that question honestly is uncomfortable. It usually leads somewhere revealing. people discover that they're buying approval they didn't get in childhood, or trying to prove something to people who left their lives years ago, or managing anxiety about their own worth by surrounding themselves with objects that perform success. None of this is pathology. It's human, but it's expensive and it doesn't work. The approval doesn't arrive, the anxiety isn't soothed, the worth doesn't get proved, and the financial cost keeps compounding. The practical intervention here is to find identity elsewhere. Build identity around craft, community, skill, service, relationships, physical capacity, intellectual development, things that are genuinely yours and can't be repossessed or repurchased. When your sense of who you are lives in domains that don't require spending, spending becomes a logistical decision rather than a psychological one, and logistical decisions are much easier to make well. All right, we've been through the neuroscience, the behavioral economics, the true cost accounting, and the psychology of identity and spending. Now let's build something. Because understanding a problem is valuable, but it's not sufficient. The final section is about the actual structural design of a financial life that works with your brain rather than against it. The foundational principle is this: make the right choice the automatic choice. Willpower is unreliable. Motivation is episodic. Environment is constant. The single most effective financial move most people can make is to automate savings before they see the paycheck. Not save what's left over, remove it before the lifestyle has a chance to adapt to it. Here's what this looks like in practice. On payday, before any discretionary money touches a checking account you have regular access to, automated transfers move money into investment accounts, emergency funds, and any other savings goals you've defined. If you're employed with a 401k or pension, maximize the contribution to at least capture any employer match. That's the closest thing to free money that exists in personal finance. Then set up automatic transfers to a brokerage account, a high-yield savings account for your emergency fund, and any other goals on the same day. The money you never see doesn't feel like deprivation. It becomes background. The second structural element is friction engineering. The financial system, as we discussed, is designed to make spending frictionless and saving effortful. Your job is to reverse that polarity wherever possible. Add friction to spending by removing stored credit card numbers from online retailers, deleting shopping apps from your phone's home screen or altogether, imposing a mandatory waiting period on any non-essential purchase above a threshold you choose. Some people use $50, some use $100. The specific number matters. Less than the practice of waiting. Research consistently shows that purchase intentions degrade rapidly with time when the purchase is impulse-driven rather than need-driven. A 24-hour wait eliminates roughly 70% of impulse purchases. A 72-hour wait eliminates close to 90%. Add ease to saving by keeping investment interfaces bookmarked and accessible, reviewing investment account balances as a positive ritual rather than avoiding them, and tracking net worth rather than spending. Net worth tracking creates a compelling feedback loop in the direction of financial progress rather than consumption. The third element is optionality accounting. We talked about opportunity cost, but optionality is slightly different. Optionality is the capacity to make choices in the future. Financial security purchases optionality. Every dollar in savings isn't just a dollar you didn't spend, it's a unit of future freedom. It's the ability to leave a job that's destroying you, to take time off when a parent gets sick, to weather an economic disruption without catastrophe, to take a risk on something you care about, to make decisions based on preference rather than financial necessity. When you account for optionality, In your spending decisions, the question changes. It's no longer just, can I afford this? It's, does this purchase add more to my life than the optionality it eliminates? For most discretionary purchases, if you answer that question honestly, the answer shifts. The newer car is nice, but the financial security of driving the paid-off car and having those payments going into investments creates a kind of freedom that the newer car can't come close to matching. The fourth element is social architecture, because as we established, financial behavior clusters socially. You can be aware of this and work with it. Find people, in person, online, in communities, who are building wealth rather than performing it. The communities built around financial independence, frugality, and intentional living have grown substantially because people discovered something powerful. Sharing financial goals with others who share those values dramatically accelerates progress, not because of peer pressure in the traditional sense, but because normalization works in both directions. When your social context normalizes saving 40% of income and talking openly about investing, the default shifts. Behavior that used to feel extreme starts to feel reasonable, and that shift in baseline is extraordinarily powerful. The fifth element is defining enough, specifically and in writing, not vaguely committing to saving more or spending less. Writing down, in specific terms, what sufficient looks like in each major spending category of your life. What home is enough for a good life? What vehicle is enough? What clothing, travel, dining, entertainment? Enough, not minimum, but actually sufficient. This isn't deprivation planning. It's finish line planning. A marathon runner isn't depriving themselves of the ability to run further. They're running a specific distance with intention and then stopping. Defining enough gives you the finish line and transforms what comes after, all income above that defined lifestyle, into resources that build freedom rather than expand consumption. People who build extraordinary financial lives despite ordinary incomes almost universally have done some version of this. They defined what they needed to live well. They built the systems to fund that life automatically, and then they stopped moving the goalpost. The result is that income gains don't disappear into an expanded lifestyle. They accumulate, they compound, and over time, they create something that no amount of nice furniture or newer cars can create: genuine independence. Here's how this all ties together. The brain is wired for immediate reward in an environment designed to exploit that wiring. Lifestyle inflates to consume available income. True costs are hidden at the moment of purchase. Identity becomes tangled with spending. And all of this operates below conscious awareness, which is why conscious effort alone almost never changes it. What changes it is architecture, automating savings before lifestyle can adapt, adding friction to spending and ease to saving, accounting honestly for true costs and opportunity costs, separating identity from possessions, defining enough before income rises, building a social context that normalizes financial health. None of this is glamorous. There's no dramatic transformation moment, no single insight that fixes everything. It's a series of structural decisions made at moments of clarity, then made automatic so they hold up at moments of weakness. It's boring in the best possible way, and done consistently over years and decades, it builds something that no amount of lifestyle consumption can. A life where your financial situation creates options rather than obligations. The two apartments. We could have described at the start of this conversation, the one belonging to someone with comfort and security and freedom versus the one belonging to someone making more money but trapped, aren't differentiated by income. They're differentiated by architecture, by the systems, the definitions, the friction, and the automation that determine where money goes before conscious decisions get made. You can build the architecture that leads to the first life, regardless of what you currently earn. That's the point. That's always been the point. The math is secondary, the psychology comes first, and now you know what the psychology actually is.